your conflict control. Then you have preferences. And Jordan definitely will be covering preferences today. Okay, preferences is integrated with autopilot. So if you see the P&A, basically the PA, which is basically kind of associated. They go together. And how do they go together? Preferences is basically how do I put my preferences? Do I want, let's say, scheduled to be on Mondays and Wednesdays? Do I want to add padding? All these things are actually captured. Normally, what universities or IHLs do, they do that on Excel. But the difference about what TimeEdit offers, all these things are automated on forms where you can actually then collect it from your subject coordinator or your lecturer. And then once the data is collected, that can be either auto-scheduled or manually scheduled. All right. So there's something that we will show in the second part of the session today, preferences and autopilot. And then you have exam, which is what we're going to focus on. Exam is a module that sits on TE Core. Okay, so basically, although all the conflict management is going on in Core, exam basically is like a subset of that allows you to do features that's related to exam scheduling, like putting in the invigilators. And I think Jordan will be showing that to you later. Yeah, so I think that's all on my side. Jordan, anything else you want to add? And then I'll pass the time to you. Jordan, you there?
Jordan, we can't hear you. I think mute.
Sorry, team. Mostly just that we're excited to get started. So what we'll cover to start with, as Trevor was saying, was we'll get into the exam scheduling scenarios to begin with. But the first part of exam scheduling, I suppose, is actually getting the basic timetable in. And as we discussed, your team's responsible for the timetable as well as the invigilator management and so on. And so we'll look at both of those. We'll do a very brief piece in TE Core, which is that availability section. So we'll jump in there and then we will, we'll get scheduling. So just before we jump in, were there any questions on what you've seen so far?
No.
Beautiful. Okay.
Jordan, if you don't mind, give a few minutes just to orientate them on TE Core, because I think this is something very new for them. Just a few minutes, just a recap of how TE Core basically does, how you schedule on TE Core, and then after that, I think
absolutely. Great call.
Good one.
Great call. We'll start. So I'll jump in now. Just make sure everyone can see my screen there. Cool. So what we can see in front of us here, this is TE Core. So where we're going to start, this is obviously where we would do some auto scheduling a little later, but we're going to start with some scheduling of exam activities. So we're going to move actually to a system there where I've got some exam activities. I've collected these with our data collection tool TE preferences. So I've collected the requirements for my examination scheduling, whether that's the times and days or whether I've got room requirements and all that sort of thing. That's configurable by yourselves. Once we've collected it, we can use our system to auto schedule these. So we auto schedule exams in TimeEdit or manually schedule them as you prefer. And once they're in the calendar, we can see them down here. And so for today's purposes, we're going to start with looking at exams that have been auto scheduled for this part of the demonstration and how we get from a timetabled exam in the basic to an exam with invigilators and with room booking for examination specifically, and these sorts of things as well, student management and all that sort of thing. So to start with, in TE Core, the process is we will schedule this exam in some way, whether it's auto-scheduled like we have here, or whether it's been manually scheduled. Either way, we get ourselves some reservations in our calendar here. And at any point, we can simply right-click these, and we see either edit, if we've created one, or create an exam request. So we're able to create the request for your exam from here. The purpose of creating an exam request is to send that particular reservation across to our TE exam product for you to do those invigilators and that sort of thing. Yeah. So to be clear, the timetabling is done in TE Core. The room allocation, the examination, the invigilators and so on are done in TE exam. So we can create an exam request by hitting create exam request, and it'll bring across the information like the duration. If we have a title, it'll bring that across, and modules and languages and the type of exam and so on, if we have that populated. Alternatively, if we look at this one here, we can edit this. So in my case, I've got one here where I've got student groups and so on that are on the reservation. And so when I create that exam request, we see that I've got 12 students. It's a 3-hour exam. It's a regular exam, not a makeup exam. I have some scheduling priorities that I want to consider, like the day on which it falls, which you can manage later in TE exam if you need to. And I've got lots of pieces of information like who's involved, the campus, again, the languages, and so on. Once I've picked everything I need and everything's all set up, I can save it here and it'll send across to TE exam. I can either go to TE exam or I can head it to it straight from here and it'll take me straight to the exam in question, which will do.
Sorry, Jordan, one key point I wanted to emphasize to the team. If you go back to the previous thing, so the reason why we're starting from here is because, again, it's one database. So whether you're timetabler scheduling for your regular classes or your exams, you're all sharing the resources. So the conflict control is all handled here. And that's the reason why your entry point is to schedule the exams here, then go to the exam module. Yeah. Thanks.
Absolutely. No worries. No, good call. So before I do proceed, obviously we've moved across from TE Core to TE Exam. This is where we're going to start doing the exam specific things. Were there any questions on what you saw so far in TE Core? Obviously noting we've summarized it quite briefly for you.
No.
Brilliant. Okay, great. So we've got our basic schedule requirements in place. Let's move across. As we move across here to TE Exam, we can do a number of things. So looking here at my exam, I've got a series of things in the examination that I want to start playing with. So all that data's come across, the number of students and so on. I've got planned students. I've got a number of students who have been brought in, and this can be managed in a variety of ways, and we'll look at that. And I've got all the information I had from TE Core. So I'm ready to start doing some of this more intricate stuff. So to start with, the first party in question, students. If I look here, I've got some registered students. These students are all being brought in. Now, generally, almost exclusively, this is managed via integration to external systems with our live customers. Of course, you can do an import if you like. You can directly bring in an Excel sheet full of additional students if there's minor changes or things like that, or if that's how you prefer to manage it, you can do that on a batch method here as well. Once we bring in these students, we can see key pieces of information about them. Like, do those students have any special needs or reasonable accommodations that we need to meet? Do we have them seated yet? And so on. And the first thing we might want to do is look at these students and check off, for example, those special needs requirements. So in my case, I do not have any, but I know that I need to edit some of these because it's not correct, or they need to be updated, or I simply don't have that in an external system for an integration to pull it through, as usually this is pulled through via integration as well. But if you do need to manually edit it, you can assign specific special needs, and obviously you can set up which kinds of special needs should be available here. So this is totally in your control. But in this case, Cotton requires a special chair and extra time. Yuan requires a computer to answer the exam. And I'll save those changes, and now those will be visible as we go through. Now, the next step is for us to actually schedule this into some rooms and get some things happening. And if we head to the calendar here, we can see that we have some examination slots we've set up. In our world, we have morning and afternoon exams. And we have our exam down here. And if we look at where it was told to be scheduled, it was the 27th of September. So we'll click that and we see that we have a room that we booked on the 27th of September. And our exam is ready to go in that room. But there are some things that we need to do first. So in order to really accommodate this exam, we might want to split this exam up. We might want to manage it in certain ways and assign some supervisors. So here's how we go about that process. In TimeEdit, if we want to, for example, take an examination and make a child exam, we can make a child exam like this, which allows us to take the existing scheduling that we've got and split our examination up as we like. And as we can see, we've got a live counter on how many seats we have left. I had 12 total that I needed to fill. I've got 10 and I've got 2. The reason I've got 10 and I've got 2 is because my 10 students have the same requirements and can take a regular exam, while I've got 2 other students who require other or have other needs, and therefore I want to give them an examination either in the same space with more time or in a different space I can manage that how I like, but here I can get the parent and child exams. And here I see them. And now I see I have 2 examinations here. We might want to name them a little bit differently for clarity. So I'll call this one regular length and call this one longer or something like that. Great. And now we can see that we have 2 exams in the same room at the moment. So we can have multiple exams in the same space that have different characteristics and so on. Not a problem. If we want to edit the length, of course, a similar thing. We can simply jump in here and edit the length. Maybe we'll make the new end time half an hour later to accommodate for a half-hour break and so on. And I have validation checking that I can do what I'm asking to do. And if I try and break it, I get a warning. So in this case, I can't do that, but you get the idea because my exam's already the maximum length. Now, what I might want to do is actually split this up. And so to show you some of the operations you can take care of here, if we switch to the room booking mode, we can see this same date, and we can see all the rooms that we've sequestered for examinations specifically for this period. So as my rooms load, I see a list of rooms, lots of rooms. What I might want to do is, for this September 27th, I want to start filtering some rooms to see rooms that have certain characteristics and are useful for me in this case. And so let's take a filter like the capacity, and let's apply a filter. So I want a room that's got at least 10 seats. I want a bit of extra space. I might have more students register later, for example. And so I can see I've got a list of rooms here. Now I was in some of these rooms before. Let's take this one and book this one from morning slot. Now we head on back. We've got 2 rooms that we can operate with. We can open these up like so. And if I want to move things around, it's really easy for me to just click, drag. And I've now moved the room for the booking. So in this process, I've created an examination. I brought across all the information from the timetabling process that I collected that needed to be represented in some way in the exam scheduling process. I've then scheduled it and split it up to accommodate for the needs of my students. And now I have it in 2 different rooms. Now, similarly to the rooms, I can do a similar thing with supervisors. Now, at the moment, I don't believe I have any supervisors that I can operate with here. But what I can do from here is exactly the same as you saw the rooms. I can just drag those supervisors in, and I can filter my supervisors in a number of different ways, like whether or not they're certified to be a lead supervisor, whether they're present on specific campuses, whether they have certain knowledge areas, like they're qualified or experienced with special needs supervision. And I can put that supervisor on this particular booking while I have a lead supervisor on that one, and so on. And I'm able to separate them out and click and drag exactly as I did for my other piece. I can also edit the amount of supervisors required. So by setting parameters, I can tell the system for this particular exam and the size and nature of the exam, I only require 1 supervisor. I might require 3 for an exam of the same size, but of a different nature. And so therefore I can edit the supervisors needed here and then track how many I have that have accepted, how many have been scheduled, and therefore as well, how many remain to be required. So I can see actually here now, I have a supervisor who I might bring in. So supervisor 1, same thing. We might select this main exam here. Supervisor 1 can't be lead, but they don't have any specific knowledge areas. So we'll just pop them in. And I can see some details here of them if I need to. So we'll bring supervisor in on the morning slot. Now, looking at the hours, I just want you to note, here I have 9 till 12 as my exam time, but I have the 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. in brackets. This is because we want the supervisors to attend from 8 till 1, but the examinations from 9 till 12. And obviously we can reflect that difference in hours for things like setup times and whatnot. And when we schedule that supervisor, they receive a schedule request that they need to respond to. They have certain parameters around that response. So whether they choose to accept or deny it on a specific time frame and so on. If they accept it, obviously we see that they're confirmed. If they reject it, we're able to then pick another supervisor and make that happen. And then obviously we do the same process here for our child exam to have our supervisors all allocated. We might bring our exam in here so that we can move on to the next step now. So we've scheduled that exam. That's now been scheduled in, and we've got ourselves an exam that's almost ready to go. If we head back here now, we can see we have 10 students planned for the main one, 2 students planned for the sub-exam that we created. We have a supervisor handling this, but there's some things that we haven't done. For example, allocation. So we can allocate students based on a number of different ways. We can do a bulk allocation and allow it to allocate based on a certain metric. So for example, we say we have 2 students with special needs, 12 registered students, and we allow it to allocate based on that, or allocate per room. Or if we want to use a more intricate, what we call standard seat allocation, we can do it here, where we select a specific exam like this. We select the students. Of course, we can search through those students and remove some of those, removing, for example, the 2 students at the top here who have special needs. I want to seat them in a certain place. And then I can allocate those students to seats, like so. And I can leave notes if I like to as well. Now, of course, that note doesn't make much sense for students because what that note is to tell them some sort of information like, please remember to bring your textbook. Please remember to bring additional pens and so on. And obviously, as we go, we have students that are left to allocate, and we have that noted. So in this case, I'll select all the students that are unallocated for this particular one, allocate them. And we look like we have 12 allocated students. We can also do things like apply set seating ranges and so on as well if we'd like to modify that allocation further, or rather be more stringent with that allocation. The next step is, if we'd like students to be able to see their public schedule, we can see what that would look like for the student. Now that we've scheduled the exam and we've put these things in place, this page allows us to test what that might look like. So let's take our friend Cotton and take her ID and test it. And this is what she would see. And so, for example, Cotton can see when her exam is, where her exam is, information related to her examination, download an iCal, of course, can see any accommodations that we're making for her for a specific exam, and so on. And all of the information around the exam that's key to her as well. And if we have additional notes for students, general notes for all students, rather than individual notes for certain students allocated in certain groups, we can have those present here as well. This is highly configurable, this page. So this is the student management side of things and the examination scheduling side of things. There are a few more features I'd like to, I suppose, talk to. So before I do jump into those, though, I'd like to ask, do we have any questions so far?
Jordan, you show us is by schedule one module at a time, is it?
In this particular case, for this demo case, I've scheduled one module, but you might do a number of different modules. You might do multiple exams at once.
Is there a way to schedule, let's say, 100 module at one go?
So are we thinking, say, one big exam in one hall, set that examination up?
Can be a different rooms, number of rooms, but let's say 50 modules in 30 rooms.
Yep.
How do we schedule that?
So going back to TE core, because this is where we start that foundation, just confirming. So we're talking about, say, one session. It could be across a number of rooms, and say in this session, actually, let's do one together. Let's say we're going to do one for ANTH 206 and 001 and 002 and 003 and so on. We can have multiple subjects or multiple of any type on any sort of reservation in TimeEdit. It doesn't quite work like syllabus. It's much more flexible. And so you may have 50 modules listed here.
Yep.
For written exams. You might not have rooms yet. You might do it here, or you might do it in TE exam as you prefer. And you simply schedule a time. So looking at our particular calendar here, we see, again, this is something we'd usually cover in the scheduling side, but whenever we look at a calendar like this, where we see white space, that's like the blue diamonds in Syllabus Plus, where you have no constraints. So let's do say a 4-hour exam or a 3-hour exam here. And that is now 4 subjects. Of course, you can do 50 if you wanted to, doing the exam at the same time. And then you can, of course, create a request out of that if you would like to send that to TE exam, if you want to manage that in bulk.
So once you send to the T exams, right? you will slot in the student, is it?
Yes. So when you take this scheduled slot essentially for an examination, you know you
Yeah.
have an exam, you know what it's for. You're then sending it to TE exam
Mm.
to handle the student allocation, to make sure that their special needs are accommodated for, to put invigilators across it and spread it across all the rooms and things that you might want to do. So
Okay.
right now, you know, you might want to spread it on 6 rooms, say. And then TE exam is also useful for looking at, you know, for example, invigilator management in general as well.
Okay. Nice.
No worries. Any other questions so far?
Ernie, you got anything, Ernie? I think you can go on, Jordan.
Alrighty.
Mm.
Let's keep rolling. So, looking at the rest of what we can do here, some more things that we might want to leverage as part of the process. So right now I have top of this a checklist. So this is useful for anyone who's accessing TE exam, but in this particular case, it's usually people setting this up and they might want to share a checklist with, for example, invigilators or someone who's involved. And we can create a checklist, simple checklist here. And so on. And we can ensure that these things are completed or not, and marked as completed or not as they go through the process, and track this for each examination. So it's a very handy way of making sure that not only are the invigilators and the resourcing set up, but all of the minutiae that surround that are also set up. Beyond that, once our examination is scheduled and it's visible in our calendar as we saw, we've done essentially what we need to be doing for this particular exam. And if we look back at our exam menu here, apologies for clicking through, we can see that we've got a scheduled exam and we can start to pull information on this if we wanted to. So we can see all of our exams for certain periods and whatnot. We will come back to this momentarily, but looking at this particular exam, the next step is simply to publish it. We can publish this examination live and make that live. Right now, we're at that point where we've got everything ready to go. We haven't yet pushed it to publish. We can simply publish this from here, and this exam is finished and ready to be taken in September. Some of the other things that you might want to use TE exam for, based on the brief discussion we had at the start there, is the supervisor management, which, if I understood correctly, is currently entirely manual. Sorry, Jiseng, just checking the supervisor management that you do at the moment, is that fully manual?
Yeah, fully manual. Actually,
Great.
Jordan, because before I go to you proceed to this one, I'm thinking, just I ask, thinking, is there a download function? Because you say publish, right? Because we are not using this, we are using our own in-house system to launch the timetable for the student. Is there any download function for this one to let us upload the file to our system?
We've got full API, if that's what if you're happy to leverage that to be able to pull that information and represent it in your personal timetable, if that's what you prefer. You can also pull that information out as an export if that's.
Or just export the information out, is it?
Yeah, I mean, you can export it or you can use the API as you prefer, but we'd usually recommend API to make sure that obviously you're getting.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in on this. So
Okay,
your publishing tool is something that you guys have, like, you know, your own system or third party. What we normally do is through integrations, we will pull out the reservations and the exam data from TE Core, and then we can send it into your downstream. So this is done through integration, basically.
Oh, integration, not by own manual uploading.
No, you don't have to do manual. If we can
Okay.
do integration, we can send the data across to your downstream. Then your downstream will reflect the exact schedule. I hope that answers.
So once you interface to integrated to our system, right, it will be published live, is it? Because currently we don't do live, as we actually go in the system, we do some checking before we put our official date.
Well, if you use our viewer or if you use our publishing tool, it is live. That means any changes you make from TE Core or exam will immediately be reflected onto the timetable if the student can access. right? But I understand. So y'all had to do some I don't know
We
aggregate.
have to do some not agree. We do some internal testing first before we official live to the student. All the
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah, that's fine because the viewer also we can set certain date limit, so it doesn't have to show anything unless you're ready to show it to the students. Yeah,
Okay,
but like for in the case of TP, what we did for them was that we set a date limit so that the student cannot see any timetable until the timetablers are okay to release the information.
Okay.
Yeah.
TP is using this your TimeEdit, is it? To view
Yes.
all their in their own they directly go to okay.
Yeah, they use
They
our
all go
publishing
into their own
because
system.
our publishing tool also can work with SSO. So they use Azure Directory. Students log in and they can immediately see their timetable.
Okay, understand. Okay. And then I think Jordan, you can move on.
Great, awesome. No, thank you, Edmund. That's awesome. So yeah, as Edmund's described, you can have this then represented in a number of different ways as you like, usually via integration. But this is the process that you will take in order to create an exam, have all of the resources around the exam scheduled, and schedule all of the things like invigilators and manage that part. Now, from here, there are two main things that you may want to look at. You may want to look at and manage supervisors themselves, and you may want to look at, for example, some reports based on this. So we have the ability to look at this briefly now. Starting with exams, I can see exams that are pending. I've got a list of exams that haven't yet been scheduled that are pending. I can see exams that are linked to other exams. Of course, I can search and filter based on this, and I can do a number of things like create exam requests in batches, export them, publish and depublish in batches, and so on, cancel exams. I can do a number of different things from this screen. So this is where, if you are handling examinations on bulk, this is where you can then, for example, send the whole lot of them live and so on. Looking at the one that I just scheduled, I can see all the key information around it, like who's coordinating and so on. If I have that information here, is it a linked one? It's not, and key information there. And if I break it down into the individuals, I can see the individual examinations across and so on. I can also see things like passed and cancelled exams, and again, export that information and view it. I can configure multiple different views. So if I wanted to configure a specific view that was for a specific, say for example, examination period, and maybe specific exams, like just the written exams for a certain subject or a certain school or so on, and then save that view, I can then come back to that set of search criteria at any time and operate from there. I also mentioned supervisors, so let's have a little bit of a look. Right now, again, I have my supervisor 1 who's here, and I can see the characteristics of supervisor 1 and what they're able to do. And I can jump in here and view it more in depth as well and see their email address and so on in order to contact them. I can see how many hours they've accepted or requested and so on. I can also see any bookings that I have currently. Right now, I don't have any currently because I haven't published my exam. But if I publish that exam I can see my supervisors listed here and the bookings that are made for them. And then I can manage that and report on that as well. I can do batch operations here, like, for example, reminding people to accept or decline where they've been requested to work. So this is essentially an opt-in system for them to then opt into that supervisor shift, so to speak. And then I'm also able to look at timelines as well of my rooms that have been booked and the examinations that I have booked in them. And I can see across my whole campus, or I can filter them down across multiple campuses and so on, and really break that down to see what my exam looks like. I can do the same thing from a supervisor perspective. So I can see supervisors across dates and filter them based on characteristics and see when and where they're doing things and get involved and change them if I need to. Lastly, I've got this room booking view where I can see the whole list of bookings that I might have, and I can again pull information from that and filter based on the supervisors. Does it have too many supervisors? Not enough supervisors? Have I got expired requests? So have I sent a request to someone and said you have 1 day to respond or 2 days to respond, and they haven't, and I still need to fix that, and so on. Alrighty, so just checking, team. So we've got a number of different things that we've seen there with TE Exam. We've looked at our timeline. We've looked at a couple of different views that we can see things through. Before I do sort of proceed back and just make sure we cover everything off, were there any further questions about what you can see in TE Exam here?
How many supervisors can you put in this system? Can we configure to our, let's say we can put 2 or up to 7?
you can have 700 if you want to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this can manage as many supervisors as you'd like to manage through there. Yeah. Were there any other questions based on this one? TE exam's fairly simple, so we may actually have a little bit of spare time before our next part of the session if there weren't any further questions.
Yeah, not for me. Yeah.
Great. The only piece that I would add then is we are constantly working on improving TE exam as well. So it's obviously being used by a number of institutions currently, but we're looking to improve it further. And part of that is increasing automation across the process. So where we might have students who do have special needs and we have child exams that would need to be created, you know, in every case, we are looking at building tools there to have, for example, the automation of child exams and things like that. So the process we went through where I manually created them, that's for the purpose of showing you, you know, every step that you might need to take, but you won't have to take all of those steps in the real world every time by any means. We are, you know, presenting you with options to make that faster and easier in the real world. All right. Well, if there are no further questions on TE exam or the TE core process to get it there, I think from there, if there wasn't anything to add there from Trevor, Edmund, and the team, RJ, I think we can probably wrap up the examination portion of the demo today.
No, I'm good on my side. Jising, anything else you want to add? Anyway, we recorded this.
Yeah, yeah.
Session.
Not from me.
So,
I can't think of any questions.
Yeah, but go through the scenarios that you
Yeah.
have on your side and see if there's anything else we need to confirm. I think what Edmund also brought up was a good point. I think this is something that you can think about so that you can optimize your process also as well when you do it. So you do one time, like you know, you use that to optimize all your workflow as well as your systems also as well. Yeah.
This one can be customized to MP requirements, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Ken.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
Jordan, we're good. I think Jising doesn't have anything. And Jising, just feel free to reach out to Sanuza or Eman or myself
Can, no
if
problem.
you have any further things. Jordan, you can continue. Okay, do we have any? Okay, Cindy's joined us as well. All right. Now we're going to talk about the auto scheduling and preferences, right, Jordan?
I am. So I guess before I move forward into auto scheduling, I just want to make sure that we've got everyone or enough people here for the auto scheduling. I know that we were planning to start this 1 hour in and we're a bit early. Do we have the right contingent here to discuss auto scheduling?
Okay, just
better question, is there anyone missing? That's critical.
Chui Hung, we're actually going to start the session specifically on how we actually do the auto scheduling. We're just wondering, do we need to wait for anyone else from your team, from your side?
I think we have to wait for Pei Ying. I think now she's available.
Okay.
Most likely we have to get her to join. Because mainly she's the timetable. Chairman will do. Yeah, she will be doing more familiar.
Okay, then that's a good point. We can wait for her. No problem. We're actually a bit ahead of time, so we're
okay.
Yeah, just let us know. Then Jiteng, we do have a bit more time, so you can
no problem. I just say,
go through a bit more if you need to.
Absolutely. And if you're comfortable, if everyone's comfortable, we can of course take a short break if the others aren't available until say on the hour at 1 o'clock, I believe, or 2 o'clock.
Since we are waiting for Pei Ying, Trevor, just wondering, okay, when do you have any version tracking of the software? Let's say you have any upgrade or any enhancements or any bug fixes on the software. Do you have any documentation on all the changes or all the fixes?
Yes, I think RP also asking us for that also.
Yeah.
RJ, you want to we all know the process. RJ, you want to comment on this? I think you're quite familiar.
Yeah. Well, unlike you're used to at the moment, we update a little bit more often. So we update practically every week. So the system is updated practically every week. So and of course every well, let's say new version of course has release notes. And what I will do now in the chat, I will have a link to our academy, and on the academy, there you can find basically all the release notes. Let me see. So if you go to product news on the academy, it's release notes, and basically for there you can see all the new versions for every week passing by.
Oh, okay.
Something
so
to note as well, to add to what Robert John's saying, is when we do releases, they're not just weekly bug fixes. We have, for example, last week, the 18th, we just released a feature where, and you'll see in TE Core, we have a number of interfaces. One of them is a reservation list, so you can very easily group a bunch of reservations. You can simply copy them straight out of the system into Excel. If you wanted to do some sort of reporting on a small subset in the moment, super easy to just grab it and copy it. And that's what we released last week.
Yeah, can you click on copy list to clipboard? Then scroll a little bit down, you see it happening in front of you. So the release notes even give you a short demo.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's
and further information, any sort of guides and tutorials are linked to this. So it's really robust and it's publicly available for you. So if you wanted to have a look around now, you're more than welcome to do so. But this is the sort of quality of documentation that you can expect from TimeEdit.
And also another question is, before you release, do you inform the customers to, test, or, before they are more comfortable if the bug fixes have any other, maybe derive at other big fixes or other bugs. So will you inform the customer first before?
Yeah.
Or
So before every release, we will inform the customers, but so we provide always two environments. And first, it is installed on the test environment, so all the clients can have a look. Yeah, and then often a week later, then we will put it on the production. But that doesn't mean that suddenly the screen is different, or let's say you have a new structure. No, the majority of the functionality, basically, well, we need to do something to make it available for you.
Exactly. I think something else to note is, because of the release time frame that Rob John was talking about, weekly or more frequently, each change is smaller, I suppose, generally, and less impactful over the period than, say, doing maybe one release every year. we're much more frequent, and so therefore from week to week you can expect to see not as many changes. You will see more getting done by far over the course of a year, and you will sometimes see big changes to things like the copy list to clipboard and so on, but you're not going to see the whole interface fundamentally change without warning, or your data model change without warning, because your data model is custom to you, completely custom to you.
Okay.
So it's a completely different way of working. So I think the far majority of our clients are not testing the software every week, because they're used to it. They know it's stable. Yeah. So
at the risk of being maybe a little bit forward, we're confident that the quality of our releases is very strong. And this is not something that we see as an issue that we release an update and our customers all say, for example, oh, my reservation's disappeared. This is not something that we see, because we update so frequently, and because they're extensively tested, and because we have the multiple environments that we use and we do test there, we're confident that you're not going to have that sort of issue as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I think we are all here.
Paying is in already. Paying,
Great.
do you have any more TT reps to invite?
send the invitations, but it's optional. So I think we can record the session now. Then can continue.
Yeah. So we're recording the session. Being we started off with exam, so that was the kind of the schedule today. We covered exam, and now we're going to actually cover how we do the auto scheduling part for TimeEdit. And Jordan is going to walk us through two modules, because auto scheduling for TimeEdit is not an isolated module. It comes together with preferences. It comes together with how you actually collect the data before that data is auto scheduled. Now, most of the time, universities use Excel to collect data, like how many lectures they want or practicals and what kind of availability for these things, setting the constraints. TimeEdit does it in a very different way, where they collect it in forms and collect this data. This data is mapped directly into the database, so it makes the data collection very clean. So there are two things that he'll be talking about today. Yeah, Jordan, over to you. Thanks, man.
No worries. Thank you, mate. Thank you. So we're going to start by talking, as Trevor said, about the data collection and the process of collecting that data and then being able to automatically schedule that data. I think by looking at our time and by the way that the first half of the demonstration went, we may finish early or have lots of time for questions. So please do not hesitate to stop me, particularly self-paying. As we go through, please stop me if you have questions. I will be happy to answer them as deep as you would like to go. Okay. So first thing, when we collect our data, to give you an idea of what's going to happen, we collect our data, and this data is obviously over the course of your data collection period, comes in over that course. It doesn't all happen at once. And as that data comes in, the way it works in TimeEdit, what we see in front of us here is TE core. This is where schedulers will work. This is where auto scheduling will happen. And in the top half of our screen, we see a list of activities that are not scheduled. In the bottom half, we see a graphical calendar. I'll come back to the graphical calendar later. With the top half, we see a list of activities that are not scheduled. These activities were collected with TE preferences and are waiting to be automatically scheduled, or manually scheduled if you want to, but we're going to do auto today. The reason that they're waiting there is because we've done some data collection, and as we go through the process of data collection, we want to first verify that the data is good. We have some verification processes in place for that, and we'll talk about them. And we can also do some other things to enrich that information before we do schedule it. So I wanted to give you an idea of where this information goes, which is to this place, before we start looking at how we collect it, so you know what the end product will be before we schedule it. Now, before we get into TE preferences too deeply, I'd just like to ask your students, how do you handle your students with your automatic scheduling? Do you use student sets, for example?
Currently, we don't actually use the auto scheduling function. So we will just timetable based on student sets. Then when we migrated over, we kind of merge our student list with the student sets. So we don't really have students in the software itself.
Okay, but you've got the student list in some place, and then you're using student sets currently, and you're familiar with how that works.
Yes, we are timetabling based on student sets.
Wonderful. Okay. I have some key differences to make clear to you before we start. In TimeEdit, student sets are not your only clash control. In TimeEdit, anything can be a constraint. So rooms, teachers, we can have availability for all of those things. Anything can be a constraint in TimeEdit. So when we're talking about the automatic scheduling and we're talking about the outcomes of the auto scheduling, note that student sets are not your only clash control mechanism. Now, when we talk about your students, in your current context, obviously you're having to marry the two sources of data. In TimeEdit, we have a super flexible data model. So if you would like to represent all of your students in TimeEdit, whether you use student sets or whether you use individual students, both are possible. In this example, what we're going to use are student sets. And before we go into looking at that example, I want to show you in a student set in TimeEdit, if we look down here, I have a student set selected. This student set can have, like any other object in the system, a vast number of different attributes. We call them fields. And so, for example, I can see which courses it's attached to, what intake is it, which programs is it attached to that the students are taking. It might be, you might define which modules are in that semester. You might have some rules for things like padding, like a lunchtime break must be allocated to these students and some scheduling rules there. But you might also have what we call memberships. And so a student set can have students who are members of the student set. And in TimeEdit, these are real students. So I might have Trevor and Edmund and Robert Jan and Pei-Ying as members of a student set. And therefore, if Trevor has a class at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, but the other three do not, of course, that student set should still show that it will clash if I tried to move the class to that 9 a.m. on Wednesday, because someone in the student set would clash. The system can do that. So you can manage it using real students and student sets in TimeEdit. And so what I'll go through today, the demonstration we see, this has student sets attached to it, but we don't obviously collect the student sets, we generate them. And I'll show you an in-system way of generating those student sets as well. So to start with, we need to collect the requirements for the class. And TE preferences, as Trevor said, is how we collect the class requirements. So we see here that this form has been sent out to somebody, and to put a hat on so we know who we are, we're now an academic or someone in the schools who's responsible for either responding to the form directly or checking off that this form is full of valid submissions and can be timetabled. So that person opens this form and they see straight away, this is the program for which I'm responding. You might collect on a module level. You can also collect teacher availability. This form could be for lots of different things. We can use templates for this, or we can simply set up a week structure like we have. So we can see we have 3 practicals each week, and this is the structure of this and the dates. Lots of different ways we can set this format up. But once we're in, we can see, for example, the different weeks. In this case, I have collecting with modules. So I've got different modules. We've got durations and things. And as I mentioned, there are no student sets right now because we are adding them with a process a little later, which we'll see. In here, I'm collecting things like what you would call suitabilities in S+, right? So a specific type of room. I might also allow them to select specific room objects if I want to. I'll show you how we can control that. I've got things like sizes, so plan size data. Now, TimeEdit, as I said with exam, which I'm not sure if you caught the end of that being, we can bring in information from upstream sources via API. So if you have enrollment data in your student system, if you have, for example, teacher data in a HR system, all these sorts of things, we can pull that information from those external data sources and represent them here in TE preferences so that the person who's responding in the data collection doesn't have to enter that data. They just have it in the form. And if it's relevant to change, you may allow them to modify it, or you might make it read-only. It's up to you. It significantly reduces the amount of work they need to do.
我先跟你讲一声啊，他们给我 call tender for new timetabling system 了了。
Sorry, was that a question there?
他们要 call tender for new timetabling system 了。哦，就会换，可能会换到可能不是 S+ 了以后。
Hi, Joey. I think you are unmuted
这
currently.
什么是还是可能明明
Sorry if we've got something could mute Joey.
行嘞，我现在在听他们
I
present
think
的是在。
she's unaware that she's unmuted.
That's, yeah. Sorry, Joey.
也行。
Okay, so look, we'll keep moving. So what we can do is we can collect things like the day on which we want a class. We can collect preferences rather than
然后
hard
只能
constraints
跟着走
and。so on. And so we can then go through and complete this process of collecting this information in the data collection phase and then move that through to scheduling much after. Now, just noting something that's different in S+ to TimeEdit. In S+, you have obviously the week pattern can't be broken. And you have the idea of a variant, where if you need to change something within a week pattern, you need to create a variant. In TimeEdit, this doesn't exist. And you can have these variants created at the data collection phase if you want to. So if in week 22, I know that I'm going to have more students and therefore I need a bigger lecture theatre, I could ask for a bigger lecture theatre in the first week and have a different one for the rest of the weeks if I wanted to. I might have a different lecture theatre every week if I wanted to, because there's no such thing as a variant in TimeEdit. It's a collection of reservations, but they're all individual reservations, as opposed to S+, where it is a week pattern, and then the individual reservations they don't really exist underneath the week pattern. In TimeEdit, they are individual reservations, each with an individual ID that can be different to one another without having to create a variant, and the management is much easier of that. And that can be done at this phase. So once we collect all of our requirements, we can review them at this page and then submit them when we're ready. And in this case, I have already submitted my data because it's ready for auto scheduling, and we can have a look at what the auto scheduling looks like. Before I do auto schedule, there are two things I want to show you. Because we've talked about student sets, I mentioned that there is a process for us to be able to generate these student sets. We have a tool called TE Data Manager. Now, TE Data Manager lets us take the different combinations of classes that we want to keep class-free, have a whole list of those. We can add them in this tool, or we can bring them in from an external source like your curriculum system, or if you've just got them in Excel and so on, we can bring that in wherever it comes from. And then we see that list of what we call study combinations. These are the classes that you want to keep class-free, similar to your idea of a pathway in S+. Yeah. What we can do from that is either individually or in bulk, look at each study combination and say, right, well, based on this combination and what's in it, I want to keep this one class-free or deny this one and not send that through. I don't want to resource keeping this class-free. I just want to let that happen. If there's clashes for this set, it's okay. It's not a priority. So you have that ability to ensure that you're only allocating resources for keeping things class-free where it's a priority to do so. Once you do that, you can take all of the combinations that you do want to keep class-free and have the system automatically generate student sets for that set of combinations. What the system will then do for you is allocate them directly into your information in TE Core that was ready to be scheduled but not yet scheduled. And you can go ahead then and schedule it with student sets. So as a user in the scheduling context, you do not need to create student sets. You don't need to generate them in an external tool. You don't need to do any of that. In TimeEdit, the system will generate the student sets for you, allocate them to the classes for you, and you're then able to go and simply hit the auto schedule button, which we'll do in a moment.
Can I just check for the student set name? Can we actually define the student sets, or it will be a pre-generated list?
It is a pre-generated list based on what you want to have as the structure. So in my world, I have this structure where I have a program name, the year, the semester, and then a group ID. You might have something completely different, but it will generate according to the rules that you set up for it. And so you can control those rules. If most universities will have a completely different, or institutions in general will have a completely different naming convention.
Sorry, let's jump in here a little bit now. Maybe ping Edmund here. So we have done the implementation for Temasek, right? And then now we're in the midst for RP. Technically speaking, most of the polytechnic curriculum are not so different because your semester all runs the same. And actually, the way we set up the student set, as you see from this example, a lot are lifted off the structure of how we plan it out for TP. So it's a good way why we do it this way, because we kind of segregate and then they can then filter out by the year, the semester for the students, and a kind of student set or pilot set based on the module selection done by the students. So those kind of information can actually be imported, or as Jordan is showing you right now, it can also be automatically generated. But it all depends on your workflow. So if you feel that, okay, because of historical data, you already know what kind of student set you'll be expecting and the kind of module selections that's going to be present, you can do so, and then we can send the data in to TE Core via an import method, right? Because that's how TP is doing it currently. The alternative way is then you can provide us the information and let the system generate it for you. So it can go either way. There's no fixed structure in terms of workflow, but we will look at your process and then we will recommend the most efficient manner to do things. Yeah.
Because I'm thinking more of the downstream processes that we have in PeopleSoft. It's already built in. When we do the merging, it's whether the data can merge. So that is probably we have to work on that as well.
Yeah, don't have to worry on that because TE is flexible enough in terms of data structure that through our integration effort, we can pull out the data and map it according to the fields that you have in PeopleSoft. I mean, we have done this integration for SUTD, which are also using PeopleSoft. So this is not an issue for us. So it all depends on what your downstream requires, because a lot of the Polytechnic's downstream system are either legacy or some other third-party SaaS solution as well. But the fact is that we can map it according to the fields that they already currently have, and then we can send the data across. So that's not a problem.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Couldn't agree more. I think if I can add one piece to that as a general observation of TimeEdit's one of its biggest strengths is that it can sit in the middle of your ecosystem and map to whatever you've got upstream or downstream. The data model, when we say it's flexible, what we mean is we've got types of objects like rooms, say, so the room type. Then we've got the rooms themselves, like room A, room B. And then we have any sort of fields that go on the room, which are those additional attributes we saw. So say I've got a room here, 1870. I've got locations, which is the type of room. And then I've got fields. That's it. And you can define what types of things you want. You can have whatever objects you want, and you can have whatever fields you'd like. And they can be all different kinds of fields. They can be numbers, they can be text, they can be categories, and they can be unique fields. You can make them searchable or not. So you have a lot of power as to how you might want to construct the data model to accommodate, for example, class IDs coming in from PeopleSoft upstream, or having the student sets set up a certain way to be consumed downstream. Not only possible, but it's what we've built for. Wonderful. Any other questions before we hit our magic schedule button? Alrighty. If anyone is a little shy and would prefer to pop it in the chat, please don't hesitate. Pop it in the chat if you'd like.
Is there a
Alrighty.
maximum number of limit for the constraints, for the setup of the constraints? Is there a maximum constraints?
No. So when we say maximum, there is, I suppose, a maximum number of objects of a certain type that you might set. So say, I might say in a certain set of rules, I want to have only one room at a time, or I might allow the user to have, say, how many have I got in my rule set here? So if I'm adding them, as you can see, I've got 3 rooms for this class. It's going to be across 3 rooms. So I can have a number of the same constraint, but there's no limit on the number of types and things that you might have. Yeah. You can make it as vivid as you would like it to be. All right. Let's
sorry, another question. Your auto scheduling, will you include the lecturer?
Yes, if you have the lecturer in the data, it will. In this case, I have not populated the lecturer in my data, but if I had lecturers in there, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Wonderful. Alrighty, let's start the auto scheduling quickly by, I'm going to just start the job. And while it does its thing with 250 reservations, I'll explain to you some of the mechanisms you have for managing the output of that. And then we'll have a little bit of a look at what we see on the calendars here. So to start with, to select reservations, I can use the filters here to filter them into groups that I might want to schedule if I want to do them in a certain order. If I want, for example, to do the large lectures or the difficult to manage ones first, I can filter those out, do those. I can do a lot of tagging and management here if I like, of all different sorts. So student sets, programs, whatever you like. As long as the data's there, you can create a filter for it. And then once I've got the ones I want to see, I simply hit the everything button and hit the magic schedule button. And then I get 2 more things that I need to do. I need to give it a name. And then I need to select a constraint profile. And this is where I'm going to show you what these do. A constraint profile is a set of rules that you can have prepared to say, when I use this profile, I want you to act in this way. When I use a different profile, I want you to act in that way. And you can program the auto scheduler to do certain things. We'll look at that. We also have this performance slider, so we can make it really, really fast, in which case, when it's at, say, 1 for fast, it will find the first available slot, drop it, and move on. Get it done as quick as possible. If we go all the way to optimized, it'll pull things that it's put in the schedule already in that job, in and out, to make sure it gets the best possible schedule based on all the constraints, and it might take a little longer to think about it, rather than just dropping it in the first slot. And that will obviously be longer and longer the further along the slider we go. We're going to go for a healthy 3 here, hit schedule. Now you'll note in TimeEdit, once you hit an auto schedule job, you can do other things. The only thing you can't do is interact with or change the data of the ones you've put in the queue. But I can go and play with other schedule. I can queue up other jobs and so on. But we'll start with our constraint profile. So what I did was I selected constraint profile when I made my job, and it was a set of rules that apply to this particular job. rules that, for example, apply to certain constraints. So if I look here, I have some of these constraints in the data I collected, and I want it to be considered in a certain way by the auto scheduler. So I have a date range, like the week pattern and so on. And I have the ability to say, should I ignore this constraint? Should I make it a hard constraint? Therefore, if I can't meet it, don't schedule that activity, mark it as failed and allow me to manually, look at that. Or should I allow it to be a soft constraint? And if it's a soft constraint, I want you to try to do it. But if you can't do it, I want to use this 1 to 10 to say how hard I want you to try to meet that soft constraint. So you have a number of ways that every single constraint in the process can be considered by the auto scheduler. The same can be if someone gave you a weekday, you can make it a hard, it must be on this day, or a soft, may I please have a Wednesday? So you can consider it in different ways. The same data is collected, but you're able to have it act in different ways using these profiles. And it's a simple drop down to switch between the modes. Same thing with times, if they give you times, if there's an order, so lectures, then tutorials, then pracs, for example, you can have that as a soft or a hard rule. And we can do a number of other things too. So we have this deviation constraints, which is just about my favorite feature in TimeEdit. What we do with that is we apply a grouping of some sort. So it might be for the same group of reservations, so we call like the same class or stream. It might be for the same type of activity, for example. Whatever the grouping, we say for that group of reservations, we want to allow some sort of deviation. So if we have soft or hard, we're allowing some sort of rule here. And we're saying, for example, if it's soft on the time deviation, we're saying that, let's say the course needs to be at 8 a.m. every week, prefer a Monday. If it can't be at 8 a.m. Monday on week 3, usually in an auto scheduling context in S+, we wouldn't be able to schedule that series of reservations because there's one in there that doesn't work. In TimeEdit, we can say to the system, well, I'm going to allow deviations. I'm going to allow you to deviate a certain number of times, let's say 3. And here's how hard I want you to try to keep it at the same time. But you can move it if you must. And what the system will then do is it will do 8 a.m. on the week where there's something, for example, the teacher's unavailable or the room is under maintenance. It will move that to an acceptable time for just that week. It will essentially create a variant, thinking in S+ speak, for you that stays in the reservation group. And then it'll go back to the normal sequence for the rest of the classes where there is no reason to deviate. And so it's essentially automatically doing what you would have to do as a human. After you try to schedule it, find that it fails, decide, here I've discovered what the problem is. Now I need to go and create a solution for it. The system, you're telling the system, well, in this situation, here's what I would do, so please do that. The same is true of objects. So if, for example, a room is under maintenance and it needs to change the room, we can tell the system, I want you to change the room. But when you change the room, I want you to change the room to a room that has exactly the same equipment, for example, or isn't in the same building. So it can be a different room, but must be in the same building. And you can only do it a maximum of, say, 2 times over a 13-week period. And that way, if a room goes down for maintenance or whatnot, you do not have to hunt through your auto scheduling jobs to find out what the problem is and then make the variants and so on. You simply let the system move it to another acceptable room for you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because we're at the topic of rooms, is it possible to actually categorize the room into different categories and only given access to certain groups? Or we have
Absolutely.
to be careful not to use over the others? Or is it
No.
possible to limit access?
It is absolutely possible to limit access. So anything in TimeEdit can be limited by permissions. And so you might have rooms that only certain groups can have for scheduling. And that might be your team, for example, let's say engineering need an engineering space. No one else can book that engineering space. But perhaps you might have a rule where other people can request the engineering space and it can be confirmed or denied. Or they may not even see the engineering space if that's what you prefer. You can have a number of ways you handle this, but it is very common, particularly in Europe, where RJ is based most of the time, some of the time, depending on how his flight schedule is, where institutions will have that sort of decentralized approach with people having to request rooms and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, I've talked a lot about the rooms and the rules. Let's head back in here and we see our activities, and we can see that we've got some activities scheduled. And we can see if we click here, it'll take us directly to where those activities have been scheduled, and we can see them in the calendar. So our auto scheduling job I mean, it was done quite a while ago. But our auto scheduling job here, we've got quite a lot of reservations that have been scheduled in a big job. Usually takes about a minute for us to schedule it. And we've got about 1,000, just under 1,000 reservations here that we've scheduled. And if we click through by clicking on these, we can see the different reservations that are in the calendar, and we can see where there are clashes if we try to schedule additional things. And so let's have a very brief look at the calendar here, just to see what we can see. So looking at the calendar, the way this works, TimeEdit presents you with a graphical interface. And this graphical interface will display at all times any clashes for the objects you have selected down here in your object list. So some things are real, physical objects like rooms and people. Some things are not real, like the module you're taking, or the programmer's study, and so on. So some things have clash control and some don't. And you have full control over what you want to have as clash controlled or not. And that can be different based on different sets of rules in TimeEdit too. Some people might have access to scheduling in certain ways where some things do have clash control, and maybe they can schedule in a different way where they don't. So this can be very fluid and up to how you want to manage your permissions. But essentially what we're seeing here, for this set of objects, for this student set, for a lecture, for this module, in this room, and this program, I now see all the potential clashes. Now I see them in two different ways. Obviously lots of colors, and that's me setting that up. I set up a bit of a color legend to make it easier for me to see, you know, these are all the same module, for example, or the same program, student set. The ones that are not see-through, so like this one and this one, this is a hard clash. And if I try to schedule something on top by clicking and dragging, can't do it, and I get told why. And I can see it's because it's the room. I can also see that by looking in here. Where I've got see-through, like this one or this one, this is a soft constraint. And in this case, as I look at it as well, it's because this would be a class for the same module. And I've told the system, I generally want to avoid putting two classes for the same module at the same time, because it's not a very good choice for students. But if I must, I can. If I want to have two 9 a.m. lectures because I've got too many students and so on, I could do that. And so if I try to schedule on top of it, I can, as you see. And in order to cancel a reservation, I can simply right-click and cancel it, and it will disappear.
Can I just do a quick check? Is this view a student set view?
This view includes a student set here.
I know, as in this timetable from Monday to Friday shows the classes that the student sets will take.
This view shows, right now what we're seeing is all of the reservations that could clash with the objects down here. So we do see everything that the student set's involved in, but we're also seeing anything for this module or anything in this room. For example, if I remove those objects, now we're just seeing what's on for this student set.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is significantly different from what you see in S+. So S+ basically works with the blue diamonds and all the basically constraint colors. So basically, if there is a space where something is clashing, for example, if it's a staff member clashing, you will see a blue line. Yeah, if you see if a room is clashing, this I think it was a purple line. So and we don't show that. What we show is basically we show you all the clashes, and we show you it's room 1870 that's clashing, and we show you that this particular teacher is clashing. Yeah, so you see all possible clashes, and everywhere where there's white space, that's good space.
Which means you don't have to do any figuring it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so those that is having a pattern, those are clashes, is it?
So anywhere where you see a color apart from white, yeah, that's a clash. And let's say the more transparent ones, it's basically an advice, don't schedule there because and there will be a reason. Yeah, but let's say the solid colors, that's a solid clash.
Okay, maybe you can explain with one example, because I think we are not used to the interface, or I'm not used to it.
Absolutely. No, it's a great point. So let's do that. I'll take you to a separate screen here, if you don't mind, where we can look at maybe a different way of visualizing the constraint, and we'll see it in a different way with some other things. We'll put some constraints on top of each other. Yeah, give me just a moment while I pick that up for you. And so what we'll do in here is we'll look at the way those constraints layer on top of one another, so that when we're viewing the calendar, we'll build it up slowly like you would in the real world. So just make sure that now you can see beautiful an empty screen there. We've got some empty calendars. Beautiful. Okay, so we'll see in front of us here. If we jump into here, right now I have on my screen a calendar that's a day-by-day calendar down the bottom. So every day for a certain period, and I can scroll between it nice and easy. At the top, I have a recurring calendar. It's a 6-week calendar here, and I can control the weeks that are displayed down here fairly easily. So if I want to add or move certain weeks, or if I want to save them, so if I want to have, say, first semester, second semester, and so on, if I have certain teaching periods, even irregular teaching periods, I can simply set the weeks and then save it and go between them really easily. So I don't have to, keep changing the way I schedule. Now, as I add things, as you saw before, into my selection list, I'm going to start seeing some constraints pop up, some potential clashes, right? So I'll pick a subject, say this business administration subject, and I've got lots of things in my calendar all of a sudden. If I pick a student set, again, I start to see more things come in. Let's make it a catch-up session. Let's pick a staff member. Now, I've got a very busy calendar up here. In order to give me some space to schedule, I'm just going to cancel a couple of things so we know what we're looking at. All right. Now, in the top, I can schedule things for 6 weeks at a time. In the bottom, I can do it for 1 day at a time, or I can do individual reservations. So let's start by seeing what we'll see here. If I click and drag my mouse, this is the process of automatically of manually scheduling something in TimeEdit. And as we can see now, this 6-week period, I have 6 little yellow boxes down here where I've created that lecture. Or that catch-up session period. If I click it and move it like this, so click it and drag it, say half an hour earlier, we see all these shift. Move it to Wednesday, we see them all shift, like you'd expect from another system. But as I said before, there's no such thing as a variant in TimeEdit. So if I want to take the first class here, say, and move it to Thursday instead of Wednesday, there we go. That's it. That's the process of creating a so-called variant. If I want to move it to another week, maybe I do a double next Wednesday. I can do that too. I'm not locked to that week pattern unless I want to be. The process of actually managing these sorts of changes in TimeEdit is really, really simple. But in terms of the building up of these constraints, we talked about seeing them and having different ways of visualizing and so on. If we look at what we actually see in front of us here, again, what we're seeing are the constraints for the objects that we selected. And if we remove the objects, we have nothing in the calendar at all. So let's add in a staff member first. The staff member we just used, humanoid. So your earlier question being, if we wanted to see just a student set, what do? Well, we just select the student set, same as a staff member. This is everything that Hugh is doing or is involved with. And so I see not just classes. If I hover over this one, I see he has a hard constraint here. It's actually a staff unavailability. So we've collected with TE preferences or directly put into the system. We've collected some availabilities for Hugh, like every staff member, and he does not work Mondays. So we have a hard block, and if someone tries to schedule him on Monday, it will not let them not do that because it's a clash. He cannot be scheduled Monday before 1. Similarly, and it's not very obvious on the screen, but this is a soft block whereby we can override this availability on Thursday because he plays golf on Thursday mornings. So he said he would prefer not to be scheduled, but he can be scheduled on Thursdays. As we go through and add additional things, we obviously see additional constraints. But there are similar ways that the system can manage constraints, other ways the system can manage constraints. If we look now at what we see down here, I've selected Hugh. Say I hit here for a second. I will get rid of a room, clear that off. Clear up student set. All right. Say I'm going to schedule a class with these things. The system is going to recommend objects to me as my next schedule object in the process. So when I look at student sets, I see some related objects here. The way that this works is we can set up what's called relations to have certain objects be related to other objects in the system. That then can be leveraged during manual or automatic scheduling to make sure that they're picked because, for example, those teachers might be qualified to teach those subjects, or those student sets might be for that subject, and so on. That same method can be used, and as you can see, with automatic object selection. So if I was just to schedule, it would automatically select a room for me. That same method can be used to automatically select rooms for staff or students who have certain requirements. So here I have 2 rooms, and I have related. Now, if I untick this, I have 67 rooms that could be used, but it's showing me these 2. Why is it doing this? It's showing me these 2 because if I look at Hue, if I open Hue up now, when we talked about our data model, this is what we mean. So we have our staff members. Hue is a staff member, so that's our object. And then on our staff members, we have all sorts of different fields of information, like their email or their name or the campus on which they are hosting. And we also have in our database a room constraint for ice cream machine. So this means that every room that Hugh is scheduled into needs an ice cream machine. And if we head over to the rooms that are listed here, that are given as results when we try and schedule him, we see, of course, it has an ice cream machine. Now, the real world use for this is clearly that a person may have accessibility requirements like wheelchair accessibility, or need to be on the first floor, or so on. And the system can have that recorded against their person. And obviously the rooms can have that information against them too. So whenever there's a person within a student set who requires wheelchair access, or whenever there's a teacher who requires wheelchair access, or any other sort of equipment, or any other sort of room requirement or resource requirement in general, we can have the system automatically select the appropriate resource based on the needs of all of the people involved in that reservation. And that could be true of any sort of reservation. So for those that are still here from our exam booking earlier, we talked about special needs later in the process when we were scheduling examinations. If you were to collect certain student sets and student groups and so on, and those student groups have members who have specific accessibility needs, we can then use that to inform rooming later in the process as well. It's just a matter of what data you have and whether you want to make it available in TimeEdit, but TimeEdit can handle it. So, looking at this, we now see, for example, on this calendar, lots of things happening at once. But if we select a room and select a student set, we have some spaces in which we can schedule, and that's these white spaces. And that's how we get to where we were before, where we schedule a class. And this gives us an idea of how the constraints work. Now, all of this that's happening here that we just saw manually, of course, the system presents that to us as schedulers so that it's really easy for us to just find a spot, right? Hugh's very busy. This is a busy subject. There's a busy student set. But we can see straight away that Tuesday is a good place to pop it. So we can pop it on Tuesday. And that's job done for that set of classes. I would also say, in the event that you're auto-scheduling, all of the same constraints are considered during the auto-scheduling process. So as long as you've collected the appropriate requirements, say, for example, I want a seminar for 6 weeks over this period, and you hit auto-schedule, the system will do exactly what we just saw, where it selects the appropriate room and so on, and places them in the right spot where there's no clashes. It'll do all of that by itself as well. I've just thrown a lot of information at you about how the constraints work, how our auto-scheduling works, quite complex. I'd love to see if you had any questions or if there was anything that was unclear. I'd like to clarify it for you.
Is it possible to undo certain job?
Absolutely. Let's do it now. If we go back to what we did before, where we have our job, if we want to unschedule it, we simply select what we want to unschedule, and we hit unschedule. Now, I won't unschedule the whole thing because I'd like to show you something else and I want to have something to show you. But if we hit here, we've just filtered just for the one we did at the end, and let's unschedule this. And they'll pop out of the calendar for us. There we go. They're gone. So they're no longer in the calendar. And that's removed those. And we can reschedule them if we want to with a different set of rules, for example, a different constraint profile. If we didn't like what the outcome was, we can reschedule them with a different constraint profile and have a completely different set of outcomes if we'd like. We also have a different tool that might be useful to you for that called draft mode, where we can do scheduling, lock it into a draft, and use it for scenario planning. And until we hit this perform changes, it doesn't go live.
是我说我写在纸，我要去查我
Sorry,
的 Bible。
If we could just get
哦，
unmuted
好了
as
好
well.
了。哎呀，
Sorry. Yeah, so
Hello?
this draft mode, of course, unless we hit perform changes,
Mom,
it won't go live.
哦是啊，嗯，
And we can leave the draft at any time, of course, as well. So if we have something else to do and we want to go back to the production timetable, we can simply stop what we're doing, hit back to no draft, go back to the real schedule, and then come back to the draft whenever we like. A week later, 2 weeks later, whatever we like. So we've got strong scenario planning. We also talked about undoing. When we talk about undoing of a reservation individually, let's say we look at an individual reservation here. I have as well audit history on every reservation. And if I would like to undo changes for a reservation or a group of reservations, I can just hit the undo changes here. I get a warning that it will be restored to the changes a certain period, and then I can just send it back to what it was previously. So I have a number of ways that I can manage changes and undo. So not just on the bulk size or side for that, but also in the auto scheduling context in a number of different ways. Alrighty, and before I jump into showing you what the output looks like so you can see that side of things too, were there any other questions?
Sorry, just a quick check. Is it possible to kind of like have a list of the modules and then we just drop it in to the respective date and time?
Yeah, sure.
Because it seems like now you already have a preset schedule. So when you click on it, everything just appears.
Yeah, well, you've collected the requirements in the auto scheduling process. So you've collected all of the modules that you need to be scheduling for. People have told you what they need in terms of the rooms and things. So yeah, the system will automatically pick the right spots for you because you have all that information there. But of course, if you would like to manually schedule it, let's look at an example of what that looks like. So one of the ways we can handle our different calendars, we could, for example, have it like this, where we have certain days, we can do weeks, individual days, however we like, and then we can put individual modules into these headings. And we can then manage modules in a group. You can configure these interfaces in so many different ways. So if you would prefer to have the times along the top like this, and have individual modules like that, and have a certain list of modules that you're working on at any given time, say you want to bring in this business administration module as well. Bring it into there, we can see it alongside the others, and then we can schedule them all. And it's just as simple as creating a class. And if we want to move it, we can move it between modules and so on as well. The same thing can be done for rooms and teachers. So if you want to see a list of reservations and you have certain rooms that you want to swap things between and see what's in this group of rooms at any given time, you can do the same thing. So I think I have one here. Oh, I don't have anything in that one. Here we go. So I can see these 3 rooms, for example. These are high traffic rooms. These are rooms that are very common for people to want. And so if I want to say, okay, well, is BH309 available for this class? Yes, it is. I can just move it. And that's me moving the room for the class. It's really, really easy to do. So that process can be applied for you to do all sorts of things. And if you prefer to handle your modules that way, most certainly you can. Were there any other questions before I do jump into what the published side of the timetable does look like?
And then can we just check if we have already filled in all the data? Is there any way to upload from a Excel sheet?
Yes. Yes, there is. You can upload it directly into the TE preferences tool that we were talking about. You can also upload in other ways as well. We can do a direct reservation upload. So if you've got part of a schedule, you can do that as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. Alrighty. I might just confirm, now that I think about it, I believe in the last session we did say that you have an in-house schedule display platform, don't you? Or is that just for exams?
I understood from the exams there were. I don't know if for the timetable. Yeah.
So how do people access your timetable currently?
Currently it's on PeopleSoft. So in the PeopleSoft itself, we can still modify the timetable. So there's two ways to timetable. Usually we do it on the timetabling software, but after imported, changes can still be made on PeopleSoft.
Right. But how do students see the timetable?
It's also on the PeopleSoft, but we currently have a new app as well. Maybe our Trey Huang or Cindy would like to share. Okay, for students, for the PeopleSoft platform, they can also log in to view the timetable, but we also pull the data into a student app.
Cool. No worries at all. So you can continue to do all of that. You can certainly continue to do that, but we do have a built-in system as well for you to be able to see this. And so just to give you a reference, what we scheduled just today, obviously I removed one group of this, so it looks a little bare now. We unscheduled that program C, but if we had program C, it'd be a bit busier. But this is an example of what you'll see in TE Viewer. And so this is what staff or students might see, depending on what this is. And so this might be for a student who has been enrolled in group A, G1, student set C, G1, and B, G5 that we were scheduled. And so they see their modules. So this student is taking Monday and Thursday classes, essentially, based on that. And so based on the requirements and the requests and so on, that student's been allocated across. Now, in terms of actually allocating your students to specific student sets, right? So we create the requisite number of student sets, but we want to have students placed in those student sets based on their preferences and so on. How do you handle your students, for example, picking which days, or are they automatically allocated? What's the process there?
For us, we prescribe the modules for the students, so they don't really choose which days.
Okay. Do you prescribe them based on any sort of characteristics, or do you simply prescribe them, and if they have an issue, then they deal with it independently?
So for us, all students in that particular semester, they will be kind of they are prescribed a certain set of modules for graduation requirements. So they don't really have a choice in that sense, unlike the university systems. Yeah.
Gotcha. So I understand they're prescribed the modules. That makes sense. Are they prescribed the classes within the modules, or are they all the same?
They are prescribed the class as well.
Great. Okay, cool. No worries. Is there an appetite to change that, or is that something you're happy to stick with as a poly?
Currently, it's more likely that we'll stick with this. Okay, the only other thing that is different is we also have timetable for streamers or our non-mainstream students that may have their own unique set of modules. Then for those, one possibility is we have to import their names inside, but it's a smaller subset of students.
Okay. Well, depending on what you want to do long term, we do have, again, a solution for this. We're building something called TE Allocate. And we're also building something called TE Registration, which lets students pick. If you don't want to let them pick at all, if it's all prescribed, you can still utilize our TE Allocate software. I don't know that I have it available for you today, just based on the fact that we're still making some changes to it. But what I would suggest is if that is something that's of interest to you in the medium term, obviously you're not looking to change it now, we do have a process built into TimeEdit that you will be able to, for example, manage students who have specific requirements and allocate them easily, whether that's individually or in bulk, to certain student sets based on those requirements. As long as, for example, you have that information available as to why those requirements are special. Yeah. Alrighty. Outside of that, we've done a number of things today. We've seen lots. I want to make sure that we don't have any further questions, but if we do, I'm happy to answer them or dive into if there's certain things that you're curious about. Happy to use that time that we do have remaining, but I think because we were ahead in the first session and a little bit ahead here, we might have the time to finish early if there were no further questions.
Chu Huang and Cindy, do you have any technical questions that you want to clarify so far? Or have you all? Yeah.
Okay, hi. I'm Cindy here. Just now I was not able to unmute because I joined from the web browser. Okay, just want to check with you. The other than auto schedule, if we are using the core module, will we be able to define some simple constraint and do the scheduling?
Absolutely. Yes. The constraints that we saw before, where we were layering constraints on top of each other, each of those is actually a simple constraint. We just had lots of constraints happening at once. For that example, to illustrate the concept. But generally, you won't have that many constraints, and often you just define them yourself in TE Core. So the short answer is yes, and the long answer is yes, and it's fairly easy to do.
Oh, so in the core module, do you have that hard and soft constraint feature as well?
Yes, absolutely. That is the fundamental of the core module.
Oh, so we can also do some unique scheduling for certain group of students, for those students who failed the module in the core module.
Yep, okay. Absolutely. And one thing I will also add, at any point where you have a certain, say for example, rule set. Now, I have set up a set of rules for myself here, where I'm allowed to create a double reservation on individual cases. And so you might have that controlled by rules in your system as well, where certain people managing those special students might allow a clash to start with so that then they can manage things. They might also have the same thing on rooms or any other sort of resource, and that might be controlled by permissions. Only certain people can do that, and it's only temporary, because then they go and resolve those intentionally created clashes using our conflict list feature here, which, if you're familiar with the conflict list thing in S+, is more of a report. In here, it's within the system, and you can manage it actionably from within the system. So while the system cannot actually have clashes, generally by default, you can manually create one if you have the permissions and do what you're saying there, where you do a special scheduling use case, and then you can go and resolve it later.
Okay.
So, okay, I'm not sure whether it's related. So does that mean that for a particular class and, particular module, is it possible to schedule 2 classes at the same time slot with the same staff? So
yes,
it's more
if you want to allow that to happen, you can, but most would not. So as an example here, let's say I take this class. I'll add a staff member here. I'll pick one that has availability. This is what happens when you have no availability. I'll pick a staff member who does. And I'll pick a subject. Let's say this subject here. Now, if I schedule this class, I can schedule, say, on the 10th at 10 a.m., 1 hour. Now, I can schedule another. Generally, I can't on the top of it because I have clash control on the rooms and the staff member. But if I have the permission to do this, I can right-click and do Allow Double Reservation. And we see this little plus. This is saying, in this case, you're allowing this to happen. Now, in this case, it's exactly identical. But usually you'll have, for example, 2 different student sets or something like that. So if I put a student set on it too, see how that's now see-through? And if I try and schedule on top of it, I can have 2 bookings there if I want to. I can have 2 reservations at the same time. But I have to manually create that clash, as you saw. That is a very deliberate process. You cannot accidentally create a clash. That is not possible.
Okay, because I'm thinking more in line with how are we going to schedule our non-mainstream? Because currently we actually treat them as a student set. So you mean that the student is, there will be clashes in the student set at that timing?
Sure, that's fine.
I will imagine if there's a lot, then it will become a bit confusing.
It could be. So you might have a different set of rules. So if I click this drop-down box here, I'll just see. Can you see a list of different things here on your screen? Sometimes the share isn't very good for it. Great. So what we see here, these are what we call reservation modes. And this is a different set of rules for scheduling. And you can have these controlled by permissions as well. So What you might see is, for example, I've been in this mode. In this mode, see how my calendar is now completely different? It has these grey bands and things in it. And if we look at the objects, they're different objects. I need a subject, an exam type. Like, these are different things. This is a different set of rules. Part of those rules can be that, for example, student sets are not clash controlled. So in this set, this rule, I might handle just those non-stream students. And I do them here, and I allow clashes for their student set here, and still record them and everything. But when I look at the main timetable, it doesn't create any issues because I've scheduled them a different way. And maybe you restrict the ability to do that to only people who should have the permission, because it could create clashes.
Yes. Okay, maybe let me just try to frame the thinking. Is it possible to only release the clash to the non-mainstream students or the cross-streamers?
Yes.
But we still control for the student set.
When you say control for the student set, do you mean have clash control on the student set?
Yes. So for student sets, there's clash controls, but for the non-mainstream, there isn't.
Yes. You would just have, in that case, this is something we would probably have to scope a little further to get the exact method that we do this. But that student who is represented may be represented differently, who is a non-mainstream student. They may simply not have clash control on themselves. But you know, everything else, like the rooms and the teachers involved, would still have it, and the student sets would still have clash control. That's possible, but we just have to scope exactly how we handle that in the final product, of course.
Maybe we have an extra layer on top of the student set, so you can distinguish the two different groups.
Yes.
Yeah, so, we can put more layers in it if needed.
Absolutely.
And then you can simply say, okay, whatever non-standards, the non-standards, for example, student sets, they can clash and the other ones not, for example.
Exactly. We have this come up from time to
you.
time in our Australian vocational education context as well. So it's something we have handled previously. All right. I think we've had lots of great questions. I really, really appreciate the great questions that have been through today. This is really good. I hope that you've got a lot out of this. I think from here, I'll pass back to Trevor and the team.
Thanks, Jordan. That was so clear. Really appreciate your time to walk us through all the functions and features for both exam as well as auto scheduling. So I guess the context of this today was actually for Ngee Ann to actually evaluate whether auto scheduling is going to be something that you would want in this first iteration. So I hope that this session has been helpful. We have recorded this, and after the meeting, Sanusa will actually send you the link. Please take some time to review it and ask us any more questions if you have. Yeah. Any other things from the team, from Ngee Ann?
Can we ask, what did you think of it so far? Would this work for you?
I think this is different, but then I would think that because the other polys have adopted, so we're actually also looking closely at partly whether it meets our needs. So far it's still, I think it's all right, but then we need to probably discuss with the team how to customize the system if we really eventually consider TimeEdit, then yep.
It's certainly different. You're absolutely right there. So it looks different. You need to think different as well. But it's as soon as you move are able to rethink how it works, then people like it. Well, it's there's a short moment where you say, how do I need to understand everything? But like, for example, with those constraints or the student sets, yes, it works everything a little bit different. So, but as soon as you start understanding it, you will like it.
Okay. During the tender, we are likely one of the requirements is probably will be like giving data sets and testing the demo lah. And so to see that whether it can closely mirror what or can we get what we want, but that one will be probably a bit later on.
Sure.
And there's also some questions on whether or not it's possible for the staff to test out the system. Like, is it possible for them to just play around with the system?
That's what we don't do, actually, because as you see, it's very different. Yeah, so one thing where people won't do either is, here you have a plane, good luck flying it. Yeah, you will crash, and that's not a nice experience. Yeah, same with TimeEdit, because it's so different. Yeah, we don't say, oh, here you have the key, good luck. So what we rather want is that we do it together with you. Yeah, and you create some scenarios. Yeah, to tell us what you want to see, what you want to have proven, and then together, yeah, because we know how it works, we know we are trained in the system, and together we can show you exactly how it works, and yeah, and then basically prove that the system is able to do it.
We let you drive, but we're there to guide you. Oh, how do I do this? We're right there live.
Okay, probably then we'll go via the data set approach to see if the data can we achieve what we want. Yeah.
Okay, maybe just let me jump in and interject at this moment. Our experience with TP over the last year has been a great learning experience, right? Maybe Peng, you understand, is that your polytechnic curriculum, I think with where TP is concerned, they try to address a lot of exceptional issues with TimeEdit, and we have done a great job in satisfying all those requirements. Okay, so it's not just using the tool as timetabling, right? TimeEdit can do much more than what Syllabus Plus currently does for you guys. We also have reportings. I don't think we touched on reporting. Did we, John? Have we done so in previous?
The TE read.
TE reporting.
No, we have a lot of reporting that we can cover, but we did not have an opportunity, obviously,
Yeah,
to do it
exactly.
today.
So these are all the functionalities that we talk about. I mean, just give you an example. Right? This is a timetable of a TP student generally, I mean, in the test environment, but you can see that it's in the weekly form, and you can tell from the timetable, like which day, how many 26 times this is scheduled for, 14 times this is scheduled for in a weekly pattern. Because I think most polytechnic are following a weekly pattern, right? But of course, in the same way, they can also show in text view which is by the weeks, the semester week. So you can see even the weeks are customizable. This is not the calendar week. This is your semester week, for example. You know what I mean? And there are a lot more other stuff like reporting, like utilization reports and stuff like that. When the students are in school, we can do all that and more actually. So essentially, coming onto the system is also giving you a chance to know that exactly these are the polytechnic issues that we have already faced and resolved for them, you know, and we can show you how this is all done. I don't think your workflow processes changes so much against the other polytechnics, just that maybe a minor few things because of your downstream system, but it's all going to work out fine because we have done all the integrations before. So the good way going forward is, like you say, to mirror something that you all will find familiar, is that you can provide us your data sets, and Jordan or our team can set it up, and they can then show you exactly how this is all done. Yeah, but I think you need to think more in terms of what more value the system can actually provide, because it goes beyond just being able to timetable. And at the same time, you know, the reason why Robert is saying we don't let you guys just test the system is because every implementation of TimeEdit is different from another. Okay, that means your implementations, your data structure may look vastly different from one of a university because they all don't follow the same workflow and their data structure are vastly different. But maybe, just maybe, what you guys have are going to be very similar to, say, Temasek or Republic because, you know, your scheduling, your semester week, your structure are not so different. Yeah. So they can probably share a lot of similarity and characteristics. Yeah.
So
Okay.
it might be an idea for you to visit somebody of TP. Yeah, whatever, just make an appointment and with a few of the timetables and see how they do the things. Yeah, so they can guide you around as well.
We have met with them earlier on, so just to have a sensing as well.
Yeah. No, I think, well, SUTD is another one, so you can visit them as well. So, and then you will see everybody's doing it differently. Yeah,
exactly.
and then you also can think about yourself. Okay, we do it slightly different as well, and well, is that possible? And then probably very often the answer will be yes.
Yeah.
I think that we have to think about what the additional features that we want. But currently, to us, T-Core is probably the most important because our display system, we actually integrate into PaperSoft. That's why it's not so critical for us to have the TE viewer. Yep, and auto scheduling, I need to take that to the team and then to discuss as well.
But actually, viewer is more than just a publishing tool, just to let you know, because it does generate reports that might be good for your management, you know, like utilization and all that. So those are good to have. In fact, we normally bundle T-Core and viewer together. It's not something, viewer is not exactly optional in that sense.
Yeah. Previously, the earlier quotation includes viewer, but we are asking whether can it be separated now. But okay, let me take a look at that again.
Yeah,
I think I agree with Edmund. There is so much value for TE Viewer just in reporting that, and I don't think RJ probably attests to this. I don't think I can think of a single implementation, even those that are using an in-house publishing that don't have Viewer. It's just that useful, even beyond just showing the timetable.
Yeah.
No, timetablers use Viewer a lot as well. So it's not, so it's absolutely fine to use PeopleSoft for the students, but even often for the staff, they was using Viewer for that.
Yeah, because actually T-Core allows you to timetable, right? But it doesn't give you a very good view of the timetable that you have already set up. So viewer allows you to do that because you can actually extract certain info that you want to see. Like for example, you just want to see the class groups information and all the related info there. In reservation mode itself in T-Core, you can select only the objects that are in the reservation, but you cannot see beyond that. And viewer allows you to do that and allows you to filter the data more. So it gets more granular and you can see more information for you to make a more well-informed decision when you do your timetabling or resource allocation. Yeah. Okay. I think it's all good. So you guys can take it back and digest further. I think we showed a lot today. And let us know if you have further questions, then we'll be glad to answer them. And thanks, Jordan, for the wonderful demo.
Yeah, thanks Robert, Jordan. So sorry I was late earlier on. Yep.
No, you weren't. We were about 20 minutes early, so so no problem whatsoever. We finished the exam quite quickly. Thanks for everyone for your attention as well. It's been a wonderful demo. Lots of questions. Love the engagement. It's really, really good. If there are follow-up questions as well on things that you might not have seen, like reporting, please don't hesitate to put them through the channels that we've already established. I'd be more than happy to answer the questions for you directly, provide you with recordings as well, if you'd like to see those questions answered and so on. We'd be more than happy to keep the conversation going.
Okay, great. If no other questions, then that's it for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you, Jordan, Robert,
Thank you so much.
thank